This is African American History is American History. On June 2nd, 1892, in Port Jervis, New York, Robert Lewis, a black hotel bus driver, was brutally beaten and hanged from the high branch of an old maple tree by a white mob nearly 2,000 strong. Lewis was the victim of a force as old and lethal as America itself, the lynch mob. They came for him after hearing that well-worn dog whistle, the rumor that he had assaulted a local white woman, 23-year-old Lena McMahon. No real evidence was ever produced, no witnesses, no proof. But that didn't matter. This is African American History is American History. By the late 1800s, lynching had taken on a distinctly racial character. White mobs lynched black people. Nearly 90% of the lynchings of black Americans occurred in the South or border states. Time and time again, white mobs clung to flimsy, often fabricated accusations to justify their violence. The excuses were predictable. Whispers of crime, theft, or the most common and deadly accusation that a black man had crossed a line with a white woman. Though these charges were often fabricated, they worked every time. And so it was that in Port Jervis, a mob of 2,000 took Robert Lewis's life in plain sight. He was dragged, beaten, and strung up, and not one person was ever held accountable. Days later, a jury deliberated for less than an hour before issuing its verdict. Gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?
Yes, Your Honor. We find that Robert Lewis came to his death in the village of Port Jervis on June 2nd by being hanged by his neck by a person or persons unknown.
And with that, the mob had secured three things: absolute power, absolute impunity, and the grim satisfaction of upholding white supremacy. What sets the Port Jervis lynching apart is where it happened. Of the 1,134 recorded lynchings of black people in the United States between 1882 and 1899, this was the only one in New York State. Port Jervis, for all intents and purposes, was a thriving modern town, just 65 miles from Manhattan. It was a rail and manufacturing hub, the first in the region to light its streets with electric lamps. The very same lamps that cast their glow above as the crowd murdered Robert Lewis beneath them. And like most racial killings, this one was buried, covered up and denied for years. Northerners clung to the belief that lynching was a Southern problem. They couldn't quite wrap their heads around the headline that appeared the next day. Quote, "Southern methods outdone." This is African American History is American History. Sadly, not much is known about the brief 28-year life of Robert Lewis. Some details are known about Robert Lewis's family. His stepfather, Hank Jackson, was one of several black Civil War veterans living in Port Jervis. His mother, a longtime resident of the village, had moved to New Jersey some 5 years before the lynching. Other details are known of Lewis's employment. He worked as a bus driver at a livery stable in Port Jervis, located next to a hotel known as the Delaware House. But these are sparse biographical details. Almost all of what's known about Robert Lewis comes from the night of his death, June 2nd, 1892. Robert Lewis was hanged just outside a house on East Main Street by a white mob of 2,000 citizens of Port Jervis, New York. Ironically, in the very shadow of a Methodist church. And, as Philip Dre wrote in his 2022 book, A Lynching at Port Jervis, Race and Reckoning in the Gilded Age, quote, "The name Port Jervis, the only city in New York where a lynching occurred between 1857 and 1950, became synonymous with intolerance in the North." End quote. This has been African American History is American History. The episode you've been listening to, A Lynching in New York, the true story they tried to hide, was written and directed by Harlan Kearsley. The voice actor for this episode was Jeffrey Schubert as the jury foreman. I'm Harlan Kearsley, and on behalf of everyone here at African American History is American History, thank you for listening. And if you haven't done so, please like, comment, and subscribe to the show. And once you hit that bell icon, you'll be notified as soon as new episodes are posted. Thanks again, and please stay safe. African American History is American History. Copyright H.C. Kearsley, 2025.